A lot of people can point out problems. There's plenty of problem finders in the world. There's very few problem solvers. Is that right?
So you're looking for initiative.
Initiative, right? That is the inherent nature of a leader we follow.
Welcome to Reedflections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. I'm Art Calderon. I'm here with Reed Nyffeler. Reed is a husband, a father, a published author, a seasoned podcaster, and a CEO of a growing global franchising company headquartered here in the heartland of America. Season 2 is developing authentic and intentional leaders. We've been talking about that for the entire season. We started with why, right? Why developing leaders, moved into who you should develop, what capacities do leaders need, where in the organization can they grow, and now how should you develop leaders? A lot more sort of strategic. Episodes 20 through 23, and we're currently in 21. That's where we're in right now. We talked about demonstrate last time. This time we're talking about delegate, and in the future it'll be motivate and operate. So delegate. What makes it so tough? Why is it so hard for leaders to learn how to delegate and give up responsibility to other people?
So for this episode, I'm going to give a little bit of a play on words and a somewhat of a mnemonic device to remind us to delegate. And the back half of that word is gate. And I think delegation is a gate to exponential progress. So ultimately, if we don't pass through that gate, we're going to be confined to exponential progress because we're going to be held behind that gate, right? We're going to be trapped in that environment. Whereas if we open that gate and we can then develop others, we can go to exponential progress. And so as we're thinking about that, delegation is a gate, right? And so that's the mnemonic piece. But then why is it so hard, which is your ultimate question? Because in order to delegate, we have to be able to do the task, as we kind of discussed in our last episode. We have to be able to demonstrate that authentically. And typically, by the time we're ready to delegate, we're very proficient at that task, right? We're really good at it. And then we start to hand that off to somebody else. And ultimately, then we're like, oh my gosh, what is wrong here? So
they don't do it as well as I can.
They don't do it as well, so we take that back.
Yeah.
So one of the tasks that early on I delegated to my children was mowing the lawn. So I'd mow the lawn, and I've been mowing lawns for decades at that point. And I have my process, right? Quite frankly, I like to do the cross cutting. So then, you can do that. It gets the nice, beautiful lines. And, obviously at the time they were a little bit smaller than I was. So I can handle the mower however I needed to handle it. And, we had a little bit of hill and all these other things, And so I have a standard for the lawn. And of course, we're in Nebraska. So I'm measured by that with all my neighbors. That standard has to be adhered to.
Right.
And you have to do it consistently.
Flaw
There's a character flaw.
Right.
And quite frankly, the neighbors don't say, oh, Reed's son mowed the lawn or daughter mowed the lawn. It was Reed mowed the lawn. And so then I'm completely responsible, and my whole neighborhood credibility would be established or delegated on that week by week evaluation. You are, I'm sure. And so here I delegate the cutting the lawn to my children, right? And so, of course, I was there first. And as I'm doing that, and this is really how we do this, I thought first I would walk behind them and I'd put my hands on either side of the mower and they would walk in front of me. And then I'm like, all right, you do this turn and then we'll walk together. Or we'd walk first and then we get a feel for it. And then we do the turn and I'm like, okay, make sure the wheels line up to the lines, and then you can follow the lines back and all these other pieces, right? Life lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And then you turn back and you do the same, and you make sure you do the pivot on the corner so you're not overrunning it, et cetera, et cetera. So here I'm delegating this responsibility. And I thought, okay, we've done this for a period of time over, weeks and months over time, right? As they've been watching and just for a little while, they're getting comfortable and they move progress. And then pretty soon it's time to mow on their own. And so then I'm out there, standing out there because, I don't want them to get hurt. And, it's a spinning blade, and so I'm walking with them, and then they make the first turn. I'm like, didn't get on the line, oh. So then it's their time to mow for the first time, and they go out there and they're going along and make that first turn. I'm like, oh, they didn't match the line.
Oh.
And then, that was that proverbial, they kind of little wide, and there's that swath that looked like a little mohawk.
Oh, horrible. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, where do I step in or not step in? And then, I obviously train and say, hey, you got to make that turn, et cetera, et cetera. Now, naturally, they do that 2 or 3 times. I mean, some of it's the strength, some of it's just understanding that, some of it's trying so many new things to learn. And I'm like, okay, what do I do? Do I just mow this? Do I step in? Do I take it back? I'm going to be judged by my neighbors. This is the front yard. They're going to see this. Guy should have started in the back. I mean, I'm questioning all these decisions I made as a leader in that process, teaching this process to delegate. Instead, I'm like, all right, here's what happened, right? And we train and we adjust and we keep practicing. Because I think as a leader, we know that, that judgment is coming. And what we have to understand in delegation is the long-term benefit is much more valuable than the short-term pain, judgment from your neighbors for a week, of doing it yourself or not delegating, right? And so the doing myself, I wouldn't have gotten the judgment, but the long-term pain of them not learning is much more costly.
All right, well, let's talk about that, because you don't have to delegate as a leader, right? You could own it forever. You could still be mowing your own lawn, even at your advanced stage currently. But so let's talk about a leader and what are the consequences of not delegating.
And let's take another step into that same analogy. I enjoy mowing the lawn, right? Because it's a time where no one's talking to me. I mean, I have the hum of the mower. I mean, I'm a busy guy.
Yeah.
It's my clarity of thought because it's so routine. And at the same time I shouldn't not do it because I enjoy it or don't enjoy it. I need to teach this skill to the next generation. And I think as leaders, so many times, well, I'm not going to delegate that. I enjoy doing that. Or I'm really good at this. And so I think when we're looking at what to delegate, is the first step is, what are the unique skills that our role at this time requires? And so what it requires in that role, back to my mowing analogy, is that I teach my children life skills that they need while they're in my household, because I can mow when they move on and go to college if I need to, or whatever the case might be. But the most important role as a parent is not to mow the lawn, it's to teach life skills for my children. And likewise, as a leader, the most important role that I have as a leader is to develop the next people, or we can't make, back to the gate, progress. We cannot make progress forward if we do not develop those people to allow for them to take on a greater role. Otherwise, we'll be consistently stuck in the same stage in life. And so that's why the delegation is super critical. And we have to make sure we take away our self-interest. I enjoy mowing, to look at our purpose, which is developing the next generation. And that's what a leader's responsibility is.
And consequently, sometimes there's some leaders that just say, well, I hate doing that. I can't wait to get someone in here and throw it on them, right?
And that's a consequence of that, right? Is then you're saying, I'm dumping it on you because I don't want to do it. And that's another reason that we should not look at our preferences as a leader as to what we want to delegate. We should look at our priorities as to what we deliver.
So when you're a one-man show, you got everything. But if you grow, your organization grows, there's certain things you should give up and you should focus on other things.
Right. And that goes back to priorities, not preferences, right? As a leader, we don't have the ability to have as many preferences. We have to focus on the priorities, right? As a parent, as an example, as a leader of your family, there's a priority to wake up and get your kid to school. That may not be a preference. You know what I mean? You may not want to have to drive them to school and sit in the parking lot and wait for them to get out and make sure they have their book bag that they can't hardly carry and pack their lunch and all that. That's a priority, though, because we know education over the long term is valuable, even though that's not our preference with our mornings each and every day. And so that's an example as a leader where we have to focus on priorities, less preferences. And the more we focus on our preferences, the less effective we'll be as a leader, and certainly the less effective we will be at delegating.
All right. So you're an organization, you're growing, you realize you need to start delegating. How do you start building that bench strength of leaders? Because some of it will be evident pretty immediately, right? You see, this person is showing some leadership capabilities. So how do you start developing that bench strength of leadership?
Yeah, and I think similar to our demonstrate, we want to start small. I think many people delegate things they're back to their preferences versus priorities. So we want to say, what is a priority to demonstrate? And so, back to my children mowing, that wasn't the first household task they did, right? That was a household task they did, but I demonstrated, can they do a short-term household task and demonstrate that, and then we build their proficiency as I delegate. So one of the first ones we always had our kids do was pick up their room, right? Your clothes or toys, whatever you want to say, that's the first household task. Something that can be accomplished pretty simply. My wife was very good and organized and had bins. And so the bins would be, this is your Lego bin, and everything goes in the Lego bin. You can see Legos in the bin, pick up the Legos after you. And so that is a basic household task. That was the first one. Now, if they struggled with that, she would be like, okay, you missed one or whatever else. So we're teaching them in that environment a basic, short-term, low-consequence task. In a work environment, that's the exact same thing you do. You delegate a low consequence, short-term task to see how they approach it. I always tell new employees, I said, I am not here to see if you can accomplish a task. I'm here to see your process to accomplish a task, because the task you're doing will not need to be done. The time will change, the task will change, or the person you're doing it for will change. But what won't change is your process to approach a task. And so what I'm focusing on in that delegation of the small task is their process, not the task. And that's a balance between micromanaging and development. Development is saying this process you'll apply every time you are assigned a task. Micromanagement is I'm going to make sure you do the task I want you to do. And so when we're delegating, what we should do is make sure that the outcome is our focus and developing them in the process, not adhering to our process, right? And so, for example, going back to the mowing the lawn analogy, I always started I would alternate between the front and the back based upon what I did last time.
Mhm.
However, my children wanted to start in the same place every time. Now, did that really matter? I could micromanage and say, well, you need to alternate, the crosses and everything else. I said, no, my goal here is to teach them to mow the lawn and that the grass is ultimately cut.
Right.
Not to do it exactly like I did it, right? Where I would trim first and then ultimately mow and pick up the rest, or vice versa. They had their own process. In the end, my outcome, right? Have the lawn mowed and every blade, right? You can't, and the neighbors will look, but do I really want to go to the detail of how long each thing took and which route they took, et cetera? Not necessarily. And so that's where we got to give them some relative autonomy to apply a process that works, because we'll be focused on the outcome and the approach, the process they're taking, not the very detailed focus of front or back first or whatever the case might be.
Right. Now, how do you know? So you have some people showing leadership potential. How do you know when somebody is ready? How do you know, okay, I can delegate something to this person now, be it small or whatever? How do you know when they're ready?
So I get this question often, actually. And they said, well, my leader never gives me anything. They don't give me opportunities, for example. And I'd say, no, you don't take them. I said, I don't give anything. I let people take opportunities. And so, first of all, if I have to give it to someone, then I have to go find that person to give to. And I know that I'm going to have to go back and double check, triple check, quadruple check, because they're too passive. They're not going to take responsibility, because if I'm developing a leader, the first thing that first is their language. And this goes back to our previous season. What do they say? If they say, for example, I'm never given opportunities, that is a sense of either victim or entitlement. But I'm really looking to develop leaders that are opportunists and say, I'm going to take an opportunity. And so what do they come? They ask for the opportunity. That's taking an opportunity, saying, hey, I can really help you here. And here's the process I would take to do that. Or I see a gap that you're not able to fulfill because of your schedule or time or skill set. That is taking an opportunity. Here's how I would fill that gap, right? And so back to my point, it's not a matter of is the task not getting done. A lot of people can point out problems, right? There's plenty of problem finders in the world. There's very few problem solvers. So the first thing is the person that finds the problem, that's what they're doing, is they're finding a problem, or are they giving me a solution that's viable and has an alignment with how I would solve that, right?
So you're looking for initiative.
Initiative, right? That is the inherent nature of a leader we follow. What leader do we follow that's hyper passive and doesn't take initiative? The coach, for example, there was this commercial that I saw, and he's like, they're in the huddle and the game's on the line. It's a field goal away or something like that. Saying, not sure what we should do here. And it's like obvious it's fourth down and they need to kick a field goal. I mean, any ideas? I mean, it's like, what do you guys think? Clock's ticking down, the timeout's ticking down. I don't know. Is that a coach we're going to follow? He said, no, we're going to kick this field goal. You're going to get you got this. I've been watching you in practice. You can kick this 35-yarder. We're going to win this game, and we're going to go out there right now on 2, right? And that's taking initiative. That's the leader we want to follow. That's the people that are going to be ready to kick the field goal in that scenario. Yet, in a leadership position, we see so many people that are passive. Well, I don't know what to do. I'm not even going to get offered an answer or decision. You're not the leader then. You're waiting for somebody to give you the answer. You're not the leader. You need to take initiative. And so that's the first thing. Are they willing and able to take initiative? Then I can delegate, direct, that initiative, right? It's kind of like a racehorse that's going to run. I just got to put the things in place here, run to that thing, and let's see how you do that and what's your process. And so that's the first thing you see is, are they willing or able to take initiative? And I can't tell you how many people have that question for me, and then I say, oh, well, I want to be given opportunities again. I said, okay, you're not going to get them because you're not willing to take them. I am not sitting here because anyone gave me this opportunity. I literally took it. And that is the essence of leadership, right? And then people will see that you consistently take responsibility, you take initiative, and they will give you more opportunities inherently. And largely it's their problem. They'll give you more problems is actually what happens because you can have shown a proficiency to solve it.
Yeah. Now you talked about micromanagement, the dangers of micromanagement. Don't want to do that. You don't want to suffocate people.
Yeah.
However, you do need to maintain some involvement, right? You delegate something to somebody who's showing some leadership potential, showing some initiative. They want to do it. So what's the appropriate level of involvement should the leader have in that?
Yeah, and I'll go back to the analogy I had with mowing because I think it's so relevant and tangible for us. So, as I talked about, the first thing is I'm holding my hands on either side with all of our kids, right? And they're sometimes their chin's right at the place. I'm like, don't hit your chin. I want to see they're capable because I need to be super close because they can get hurt, right?
A lot of direct involvement.
And a lot of direct involvement. Then after I get a level of comfort that they can manage the mower, I then stand on the driveway, right? And I'm watching them mow the front yard. So if something happens and there's a danger, I can be there, before it really gets out of hand. And so then, obviously over a period of time, they're comfortable and they're like, I got it. Every person that's been delegated to is like, you're micromanaging me. And then pretty soon I'm like, all right, they've got this, and then you watch in the back. And then the next time I'm watching after they finish. Right. Because I'm like, okay, if you can handle it, nobody's going to get hurt. I'm going to watch after they're finished. And then I remember, this was a scenario that I was there and I said, how do you think you did? And this is the review, the feedback. And I said, I did a great job. I said, okay, you think you missed anything? Nope, I got it every time. It's that supreme confidence of a teenager, I said, okay, did you notice, because in Nebraska, we have sidewalks. And between the sidewalk and the street, there's a little, 3-foot section and otherwise, and that was missed. I said, okay, anywhere you think you missed. Nope, I got it all every time. I said, now what about that over there? That just grows super fast? You know what I mean? It's like in the last hour that grew up, overnight. And they're like, oh, I'll get it next time. No,
Yeah, next week.
And so I think that's the next thing is we can't get two hands off that we aren't evaluating at the other time on the other side. And that's an example of looking at that on a broader sense. And we kind of back away as we show proficiency. So what do we not do? We don't back away immediately. And we don't stay too involved when they're showing proficiency. And that is where we have to, it's somewhat of an intuition, adjust based upon their ability to do it. Because if I walked inside and after I was holding the hands on either side and away from that, they'll be too insecure, right? If I just inspected afterwards, they wouldn't know what to do. And so it's a progression of training. And we really need to think through that. What task have we assigned and where do we back off those initiatives so they can ultimately handle more?
So get a little bit more in the weeds, if you will, about the cadence of checking in with them. So you delegate something, someone's shown some initiative, and when do you, how do you check in with them? How do you define that? And I know you mentioned intuition. Not everybody has as much intuition as you do, right? So what are some guidelines, some helpful hints on how to do that? Cadence?
So what I would say is first, going back to what we said on the demonstrate, is break it down into processes and make sure they have the first process done. And I'll give a movie analogy that I think is really relevant with this, and that's the Karate Kid, right? And so here is, and just to build the scenario if you haven't seen it, Daniel-san, he got beat up, right? And he wants to learn a new skill, so he's got the drive, the motivation to do it, and he just wants to go beat somebody up. Well, Mr. Miyagi knows that he's not going to walk out there and beat somebody up, right? He can teach him a technique, but that would be easily defeated. And so what does he do? He makes him go do his housework, basically. And all that housework is designed to get muscle memory. And if he wasn't doing a good job, he would go and correct him. He would adjust his hands and all these other things on the basic thing. And he would build on that step by step by step by step. And then he would challenge him at a greater degree. And so what he would see in that scenario is the proficiency of that learner was to a point where they were comfortable with the task at hand. And that's where we build on top of that. So if we see that they're consistently comfortable with that task, we build on top of that and we remove our micromanage of that. And we see the development of Daniel-san in that case because he became proficient in the task, and we see the movie develop that ultimately he's using those things at a greater scale, and it was all built upon each other. And this is no different than when we're in school, right? I mean, we're learning our letters, then we construct words, and the majority of the words are 3 and 4 letters. And that's just combining 2 letters at once. I mean, I remember seeing grade school environments and being in grade school. We'd learn our A, B, C, Ds, of course, and then we have AT, and it would be eat, which is probably the word you memorize first, right? I
Oh,
mean, we have that
yes.
E, and then we add the AT to it. So now you got your first 3 letters. Then you realize you could just reorganize them as 8.
Yeah.
And then you probably like ETA. When am I going to eat? You know what I mean? So, I mean, those are all the 3 letters you're putting together. And that was just a building process. And so once your teacher realized you knew how to eat, she'd teach you how to spell it. You know, so ultimately that was the building on top of the letters over time. And that's how we learned, right? Is we add a basic element, the letter, we combine that with other letters, and then that became structure of sentence, right?
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 21, Delegate. Thank you very much, Reed, for your time sharing with us. Thank you, listeners. We appreciate you tuning in. Episode 22, Motivate, coming up on Motivate. Learn to engage your leaders and help them connect to the vision. In the meantime, I'm Art Calderon. Stay purposeful.
If you are there as a leader and you want to delegate, remember that is your gate to exponential progress. And so first, if you're going to delegate priorities, not preferences. Make sure that whatever you're delegating is a priority for the organization and the development of the individual you're developing. Then structure the progress with which you delegate. Just with the mowing analogy, start simple with your hands on the proverbial wheel close, and then ultimately back away to give them the ability and autonomy to operate in that over time. And then as they show proficiency, we build on top of that delegation. That's an effective way as a leader to develop your team through delegation. I encourage you to start today. And as you do that, you'll be amazed at the exponential growth you see as a result of your ability as a leader to delegate.